Hello, my name is Dawson Church, and I am delighted to share with you this information about my upcoming Shift Network course called Liberating the Genie in Your Genes. But first, a fun personal story. Many years ago in my 20s, they told me about affirmations, visualization, and the importance of having a clear goal for your life. So I took all that good advice, and I knew that by this stage of my life, I would be semi-retired. I had this crystal clear vision of how it would look. I knew I'd be living in the woods in Northern California, in a beautiful space. I would be meditating 4 hours a day, listening to beautiful music. I would be gardening. I would be doing a little bit of consulting. But basically, I'd be living this beautiful, happy, perfect, semi-retired life. And today, I'm not, because I found something. I discovered a treasure trove of information that totally changed my whole life direction, and I know it has the potential to change your life too. I wrote a book about this called The Genie in Your Genes, The Genie in Your Genes, subtitled Epigenetic Medicine and the New Biology of Intention. Let me tell you how that came to be and why this could have such an enormous impact upon your life. I would go to conferences. I'd go to energy medicine conferences and hear about the remarkable work being done on physical symptoms like pain. I'd go to energy psychology conferences and hear how energy psychology was able to alleviate serious mental health issues like anxiety, depression, phobias, and PTSD. I'd go to biology conferences and hear about the role of energy in our cells and in our bodies. I would go to endocrinology conferences and hear about how our hormones like adrenaline, cortisol, DHEA so drive and affect our bodies. And then I would go to genetics conferences and hear how this new field called epigenetics, epi meaning above the level of the genome, was chronicling the influences that affect our cells from outside the cell, even outside the body, how the environment outside the body can turn genes on and turn genes off. These things were tremendously exciting, except no one was drawing the lines, connecting the dots between all these fields. So I wrote the book, The Genie in Your Genes, to connect those dots, and I was really gratified when it began to sell really well, became a bestseller, and eventually it's been adopted by quite a number of colleges as one of their required readings for their courses, because it, in plain and simple language, shows you what you can do and how all of these parts of your body interact. How do your neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine interact with your hormones like cortisol and DHEA? How do your brain states like beta, alpha, theta, and delta waves interact with things like your heart rate variability and other parts of your body's function? But best of all, I make all this information usable and practical. I'm not interested in ivory tower academic theory. I'm interested in you feeling really good and feeling good in your mind, your body, and your spirit. So each week of the course includes practical tips, practical techniques you can use to feel better right now. And they're not difficult ones. They don't require any religious or spiritual training. They don't require any set of philosophical beliefs. They don't require years and years and years of practice. The things you can do right now and you'll feel better. When I mean right now, I mean right now. Each week we'll learn one of these things, and you won't have to believe me, they'll make you feel better. You will literally feel better in your body immediately during the course of that week's exercise. I'll then encourage you to use that good feeling and practice that technique in the course of the following week. So the first week is called Your DNA is Not Your Destiny. The old myth was, it's all in the genes. If my mother had breast cancer, I'll get breast cancer too. If my father had a heart attack, I'm at risk for heart disease as well, and nothing could be further from the truth. Yes, there are genetically inherited diseases, but you have a tremendous amount of influence over whether those genes are expressed or suppressed by your thoughts, your feelings, your level of stress, and all of the behaviors you choose for your life. The second week is one of my favorite topics, neural plasticity, the way our brains are being shaped by how we use them. The software is literally rebuilding and recreating the hardware in our brains. Our thoughts, our feelings, strong emotions are shaping the structure of our brains. If you send a signal through a neural pathway over and over and over again, your body is so smart it says, wow, I notice he's using that neural pathway. I notice she's thinking that same thought over and over again. That must be important. Let's add neurons to that neural circuit and make it bigger. And so with every single thought you think, with every single strong emotion you feel, your beliefs, your intentions, all of these things are literally changing the shape of your brain. Now, if you're just thinking all the random thoughts, feeling all the negative feelings, letting anger and resentment wash through you, that's bad news. But you can change that. There are simple ways of interrupting those pattern thoughts, shifting those old conditioned reflexes, and installing new ones that are far more productive. And after a while, you actually change the structure of your brain. That's why week 2 is called Your Designer Brain, complete with exercises on how you can start to shift these patterns and build a brain that really works for your health long term. Week 3 is all about energy in healing. When electricity was discovered in the late 1700s, within 1 year, doctors were already experimenting with electricity for healing. And electricity and magnetism, these energy fields, they're invisible, but they have an enormous effect on your health and well-being. My friend, biologist James Oshman says that energy is the currency in which nature communicates. And we'll explore the use of energy in healing, and also how your cells have energy fields. Your organs, like your heart and your brain, have energy fields, which we measure through instruments like EEGs and EKGs. We're measuring these invisible energy fields, and they can be used to trigger the healing process. The next week is called Practices that Affect Gene Expression, because there are certain practices that we now know are literally triggering genes turning on and genes turning off. And these practices aren't ones that I just think this happens. These are ones where there's evidence showing that they shift gene expression, and these are called evidence-based practices that actually, literally, though they're simple, are affecting which genes are turned on, which genes are turned off throughout every cell in your body. And we'll list those practices in the course of that week. Week 5 is all about memory, reconsolidation, and extinction. Now that sounds like a mouthful, but it's one of the hot new topics in psychology today. We form memories, especially traumatic memories, often very early in life, and once our brains have been conditioned to be fearful, angry, resentful, suspicious, all of those negative emotions, it's really hard to change them. So how do you extinguish those fearful memories? How do you literally eradicate them? And how do you shift them and shift your brain, your ways of thinking, your worldview, your outlook, your perspective to one that supports your health and well-being? There's a lot of new science about this, and we'll show you that week how to apply that new science with a set of evidence-based practices that can literally extinguish old troubling memories and reconsolidate your neural network to support your health, your well-being, and a positive outlook on life. The final week is called Transcendence, Spiritual Practices to Maximize Your Potential. One of the really wacky things about psychology is that for the last 50 years, we've measured problems, anxiety, depression, PTSD, phobias, and we're really good at doing that. We can measure how depressed you are, how anxious you are, and the goal of psychology has been to relieve that depression and that anxiety and bring you up to a state where you're normal. You don't have those anxious or depressed or phobic symptoms anymore. But that's just a baseline. That's just getting up to normal. What happens above normal? Can we spark transcendent states that are way above normal? There's a new brain science now that's looking at these really high frequency waves called gamma waves. When there are flashes of gamma, they appear to integrate brain regions into insights, into creativity, and into transcendent states. We'll look at this newest research on how this aspect of transcendence can take you from baseline, just being okay, to having a absolutely fabulous, fun-filled, love-filled, joy-filled, maximized, optimized life. We want you to be far better than just that normal baseline of not having an anxiety or depression. We want you to be vibrantly healthy and vibrantly happy, and week 6 is all about how to go there. So that's a brief overview of the course, and I would love to have you join me on this fun, engaging, dynamic 6-week journey. Click the button on your screen, enroll now, sign up, and commit to your own health and well-being in this way. Thank you.